Roz Hall and I'm a ceramic artist from Canberra. I live and work on the Ngunnawal and Ngambri nations here. Live and work in a tin shed. Well, I don't live in it, but... And obviously if it's freezing, like Canberra gets to be, you can't really do anything with absolutely solid frozen hands, but when it's just a beautiful day, winter or summer or anything, it's always lovely in Canberra. My parents have always been very supportive of creative making and doing. So my grandma Lorraine, she was always a very creative person. So on my mum's side, I've got that influence from my grandma Lorraine. My mum and her sister Janice are both very creative people. So I've always had art around me, and it's always been a very supportive kind of thing to be creative. And my mum's always sketching and doodling, and it was always like a favourite pastime of mine when I was younger to just do creative stuff. And then on my dad's side, almost like diametrically opposed, but he's super creative in like an engineering and science like kind of way. But I've always known that there is this culture of creating, fixing, making within my family. And it's always, I think the main thing is that it's been supported. I thought nothing of the drawbacks of a creative lifestyle. It was just kind of like a given that I could pursue it because they see making as like a valid thing. So that's really nice. So when I was in high school, I did all the art classes that I could, and I had some very minimal ceramics lessons in high school. But that was like one of the first experiences when we did this ceramics lesson where we had to create some kind of object, and I chose to create one of my hiking boots. And I remember I could create this hiking boot replica in clay in the way that I imagined it must feel like for people who are really good at drawing to be able to replicate something, that I could make it and it would just come out of me, and I didn't feel like there was much effort going into it, and it just looked amazing at the end, and it felt great, and I got praise from the teacher, and that was the beginning of my interest in ceramics. And then at Dixon College I did more ceramics based courses rather than just general visual arts, and my teacher Alison Mulang, she just really believed in me, and I think it was amazing to have a teacher who like went out of her way to help me, and she was this influence in seeing how you could pursue ceramics through like a tertiary level of education. That was definitely like the point where I felt that I could pursue ceramics through uni and further my skills in ceramics. Yeah. I did get to do like one major project at the end of my ceramics courses at Dixon College where I chose to do this like large chandelier that had ceramic pieces dangling off it. And she actually ended up purchasing that piece from me in year 12, and it was just astounding to have that kind of support from a teacher. I think very beginning of my ceramic education, it was kind of thinking about the use of ceramics beyond functional wear, I suppose, or like its basic means of use. Yeah. I was really lucky to be able to go to the ANU and see how it was before the pandemic. When I was there at the very beginning, it was just a really amazing space where all of a sudden you were around people who all had the same belief and intention to create art, and it was no longer that you were kind of the odd one out in your family gatherings that has the creative interest. You were around people who all had that same potential and desire to create, which I find sometimes difficult to create things like the kind of purpose and value of creating. But when you're around people and at uni where everyone's doing that, it's just like gives you a sense of purpose and camaraderie with those people. So when we were sent home throughout the pandemic and we no longer had contact with all of the other students there, I think it really impacted me in my productivity and motivation to make. And I found that a lot of that motivation comes from the observing other people doing things and being able to have that feedback, just random feedback, not like scheduled Zoom time feedback. Just when someone's walking past you in the corridor and they can talk to you about your work, or you can give them advice as well. So that was like the main thing that really like was just so lacking throughout the pandemic. I don't know whether there ever was or could be like a silver bullet or a perfect solution to like have that same experience at home as pre-pandemic, but I think you can certainly patch holes, but I don't know whether you can really create the same environment again. It was a real shame that my degree ended throughout the pandemic. I just feel very lucky to have had the experiences before that, to know what a functioning ceramics studio is like without COVID restrictions. Yeah. So leading into the work that I created for the grad show last year, it was very much like localized to that year. I think one of the assignments we had, there was a point where we had to interrogate a piece, and I really enjoyed how it had this kinetic interaction with the audience. And so initially, the initial idea, it was sparked by having audience interaction, which is quite a funny thing throughout COVID, having people touching artwork. And one of the teachers at the ANU suggested like that's not really doable throughout the pandemic. And it's also quite difficult to achieve in making a piece that people will feel comfortable to touch. So the thing that I wanted was the movement, which in the piece that we were interrogating, it was created by audience members touching the artwork, but whether I would be able to create an artwork with kineticism that wasn't created by people. So then I started thinking about toys and like kind of clockwork mechanisms. To learn to make one of those would be a year's worth of study and work in itself. So that kind of evolved then further to the point of thinking about the simplicity of generally functional appliances and how most of them come down to a really simple movement in the mechanism of the appliance. Like a fan is simply rotating and a bread knife is just gyrating, or whatever you'd call that. Another one of my pieces is a hand mixer that's also it's rotating. Obviously at very fast speeds though. That's what I learned with the help of my dad. So now I know how transformers work. So that was the point when I realized that I could use appliances to move the work and create that kineticism that I desired, and it didn't have to involve me creating the mechanism or people touching it. And that, in combination with the materiality of ceramics, just creates this like overused word, but juxtaposition of the materiality and the familiarity of it and the harshness and the function that you're used to of both items and both mediums meshed together. Ultimately, I just wanted to create these pieces that made you surprised and maybe feel a bit happier looking at it. I think I realized throughout the pandemic that you don't have to create artwork that has deep and meaningful undertones, and that you can just create work that you enjoy making foremost. That's what I did, and I feel happy that what I made is what I enjoyed making, and it wasn't pandering to anyone's or the art world's kind of desires of what the work should be. So it feels fortunate that it's well received. I enjoy making it, and it still has like meaningful undertones, but not so serious, you know? So in the exhibition, when I have exhibited these pieces, people are quite surprised by them, and I was kind of surprised by the people's attraction to them. And I knew that obviously they are surprising, and they kind of scare people, because we know that ceramics has this materiality. Everyone has broken a cup. Everyone knows what it's like when something cracks. And in all of these pieces, there is a cusp of surprise where we don't know whether it's going to go badly or not. I think surprise can be so many emotions. It can be a happy kind of surprise or terror. And people are just like so enticed by that, just standing there and watching it. But I think that the sound that all of the pieces make is actually just like kind of an unintentional side effect that's actually quite appealing as well. I think especially the bread knife piece, it makes such a jarring, chattering sound that like even sometimes I wonder if it may break that time that it's being exhibited, but it's held strong so far. So the pandemic definitely affected the outcome of my work in ways that I didn't quite realize it would, but it was very much more like practical kind of measures that I found that I was making less work, making smaller work, and didn't really have the opportunity to do like glaze tests or really push my practice in the dimensions that I wanted to, and try crazier things. I ended up making for like an optimum kind of scale, and I created a glaze crayon influenced by Tanya Rowland's work, and she was a resident artist at the ANU at one point when I was there, and she gave us her glaze crayon recipe. So I created one that had like wax in it, so it would have this like crayony, like very much like the Crayola kind of effect. So the grad show did end up being online last year, but it was remedied by having a smaller version of the grad show this year called New Alumni at the ANU, and that was on for 2 months at the ANU School of Art Gallery. But during the online grad show last year, it was still good to have something come of it, and we had photos taken. So I was still able to like build up a bit of a portfolio, and then we had like a bit of a party, and at the party I was awarded 3 Emerging Artist Support Scheme Awards. So the first one was a group show at Craft ACT called Emerging Contemporaries, and that was with a whole bunch of people from my cohort, craft cohort, and that was amazing because it was the first time that the work from that I created for the grad show was exhibited to people. So it was sitting on my back deck for a couple months between December and then install in January. And the opening night was huge. There was so many people, and it was finally this like feeling of satisfaction of people observing the work in person and being able to see the audience reaction to it, which was so much of why I created the work. So the second award that I received at the ANU grad show was a group show at the Canberra Potters Society with fellow students from the ceramics cohort, and that was amazing to have our work exhibited a second time. I was able to exhibit the pink bread knife work as well, and that was also well received, and I was able to have a video of it next to the work as well, which it's annoyingly loud, so it was great to be able to combine that kind of multimedia so that you could still see it moving, but you didn't have to have the noise factor, which is sometimes annoying. Sometimes it's like obtrusively kind of art world, but sometimes it's just annoying for the gallery sitter. Yeah. And then the third award was a residency at the Canberra Potters Society, which was on from April to June. And that was just like amazing to have my own space, to have access to like whatever facilities I desired. And it was definitely a lot more of a learning curve than I thought it was going to be. My intentions and dreams and hopes were very much more like, I'm going to create a huge batch of functional wear and make something for an exhibition. And it kind of ended up being a bit more like, how do I organize myself as an artist? How do I make when I don't have assignment deadlines? How do I kind of market myself as this like artist now? I kind of cut back on what I created, but I was still able to achieve some things. And I think it was more so an important learning experience of how I am as an artist and how I can try to continue being an artist, but also have a foot in the real world. And I was able to create time blindness behind me. When Ollie first asked me to participate in the Linear Non-Linear exhibition at Tributary Projects, curated by Alinda Narayanan, She was hoping to have a show where neurodivergent and non-neurodivergent artists could come together and just have an exhibition that was exemplifying that people with neurodivergence can and do have art practices. So I'm definitely a bit of a part of the tsunami of late age adult diagnoses or alignment with ADHD symptoms, and time blindness in me is real. And if you know me, I've been late to something that we have organised together. So I thought that it was like a point where I could use my experience, use that in connection with the Kinetics of Uncertainty collection. It was satisfying to have like a kind of greater meaning or motive in combination with the intention to have parts moving around interestingly. And it was received really well at the exhibition opening. People came up to me and saw the title of it and read my artist statement and totally aligned with the work and said, like, I understand that feeling of trying to keep schedules and deadlines, and I resonate with that feeling of being squeezed by time. So it was just like really heartening to have that in response, especially because I created it like the day before the exhibition. So so with time blindness, I initially chose the appliance. That was my kind of point of catalyst of the ideas. And I thought and I was thinking about hourglasses as well, time and sand passing and all that. So a fan and an hourglass kind of shape could work together in a way. And I was just kind of thinking about an appliance that I hadn't used yet. I'd done a hand mixer and a bread knife and 2 record players, and they were all different colours themselves. So I thought having a yellow piece seemed like the next way to go. And then the actual size and shape of it was very much measured against the fan piece. I still wanted to create something that had that kind of minimalist design and aesthetic in the shape of like the form of the ceramic parts, but still wanted to have that chaotic kind of scribbly design with the crayon on top of it. And I think that surface decoration, it works well to kind of have the double meanings of that kind of the feeling of chaos amidst trying to fit yourselves into schedules and timing things, and it all just kind of came together very naturally. I think the future is all about juggling to maintain the ceramics career as well as other things in life that will get me some kind of income. Maybe that could eventually be ceramics, but at the moment it's the real life juggle of all those things, which I think is kind of that rude shock you get after university. As a piece of inspiration for people is just that imposter syndrome is so wholly real in artists, and everyone feels it. I think no matter how famous they are, maybe just not putting so much pressure on yourself. Do as I say, not as I do, however. Like, I'm learning that.